Clara was over her. She repeated it like a mantra, a prayer whispered into the quiet dark of her own apartment. 2 years, 4 months, and 7 days of a silent, gnawing ache had finally been cauterized. She had performed a kind of psychic surgery on herself, excising the tender, hopeful parts of her heart that had belonged only to Lena. The scar tissue was thick, protective. She could sit across from Lena now, listen to the familiar cadence of her voice, and feel nothing more than the placid affection of a good friend. It was a victory, hard-won and brutally necessary. A peace treaty signed with her own sanity. She had built walls. Not of brick and mortar, but of polite distance and carefully curated apathy. She learned to filter the light in Lena's eyes, dulling it from a supernova to a simple reflection. She learned to hear Lena's laughter not as music, but as mere sound. It was an exhausting performance, but one she had perfected over countless nights spent on this very couch, acting as the supportive confidant while her own soul was quietly screaming. Now, finally, it was no longer an act. The relief was immense, a vast and empty expanse where the hurricane used to be. She was free. And then there Lena was, curled on the other end of that same couch, dismantling Clara's peace with nothing more than her presence. She had shown up an hour ago, her face pale and her eyes shadowed, the ghost of a fight with Mark clinging to her like cheap perfume. This scene was a classic, a rerun Clara had seen a dozen times. Lena, heartbroken over a man who was a placeholder. Clara, the steadfast shoulder to cry on. Except this time was supposed to be different. This time, Clara was supposed to be immune. He just doesn't get it, Lena said, her voice frayed. She picked at a loose thread on one of Clara's throw pillows. We were talking about the future, about moving in together, and it was like we were speaking different languages. He was talking about square footage and mortgage rates, and I was trying to talk about what it feels like to build a home with someone. A real one. And he just stared at me. Clara nodded, making the appropriate sympathetic sound. She cataloged the details of Lena's face with a clinician's detachment. The slight tremor in her bottom lip. The way a single strand of her dark hair had fallen across her cheek. The gold flecks in her brown eyes, usually so vibrant, were muted now, like embers dying out. For 2 years, a look like that from Lena would have been a physical blow, a hook in her gut pulling her closer. Now, she registered it simply as data. Sad friend. Offer tea. I'm sorry, Len, she said, and the words felt blessedly neutral on her tongue. No tremor. No hidden meaning. He never really saw you. Not the real you, it was the truth, and it was something she could say as a friend, untainted by the selfish desire that used to poison every word she spoke. Lena looked up, her gaze finally meeting Clara's, and for a terrifying second, the world threatened to tilt on its axis. There was a raw vulnerability there, a desperate searching that went beyond her usual post-fight malaise. It bypassed Clara's new walls as if they were nothing but mist. She was not over her. The thought crashed into her with the force of a physical impact, stealing the air from her lungs. It was a lie. This whole fragile piece was a lie she had told herself, a house of cards built in a wind tunnel. The ache was still there, dormant but not dead, a sleeping dragon in her chest. And Lena's sad, searching eyes were waking it up. Lena's voice dropped, becoming small and fragile, the sound of something precious breaking. It's over, Clara. For real this time, she pulled her knees to her chest, making herself smaller. I ended it. I told him I couldn't do it anymore. Pretend. Clara's heart, that traitorous organ, gave a painful lurch. She should feel relief for her friend. She should feel vindicated that the obviously ill-suited relationship was finally done. But all she felt was the cold dread of proximity. Lena was free. And that was the most dangerous thing in the world. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy with everything that had just been said, and everything that had not been said for years. Lena just stared into the middle distance, her expression lost. The apartment, which had been Clara's sanctuary from her own feelings, suddenly felt like a cage, shrinking around the two of them, forcing them into a shared space that was becoming electrically charged. Then, Lena looked at her, and the question she asked was the one that brought every one of Clara's carefully constructed walls tumbling down into dust. Can I just stay here tonight? Lena's voice was barely a whisper. I can't go back to my place. It's too empty. And I don't want to be alone. Clara's throat was tight. Of course, she managed to say, the word scraping its way out. You can take the couch. It was the safe answer. The friend answer. But Lena shook her head, a small, desperate movement. Her eyes were pleading, shimmering with unshed tears. She hesitated, biting her lip, as if steeling herself to ask for something monumental. No, the couch feels a million miles away, she paused, and her next words were so quiet Clara almost didn't hear them. Can I sleep with you? Time stopped. Lena rushed to clarify, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. Not like that. God, no, I just mean, in your bed. I can stay on my side. I promise. I can't be in a big empty bed by myself right now. Please, Clara. The plea hung between them, a fragile bridge over a chasm of unspoken history. It was a request for intimacy so far beyond their established boundaries that it shattered them completely. To say no would be cruel. To say yes would be a form of self-destruction. Clara felt the sleeping dragon in her chest stir, unfurling one great, fiery wing. She was standing on the edge of a cliff she had spent 2 years backing away from. And she was about to jump. Okay, Clara heard herself say, the single words sealing her fate. Okay, Lena. That night was a study in exquisite torture. Clara lay stiffly on her side of the bed, a rigid line of feigned sleep, hyper-aware of every single detail. The soft scent of Lena's vanilla shampoo. The whisper of her breathing in the quiet room. The warmth radiating from her body, a sun just inches from Clara's own cold planet. She felt Lena shift, the mattress dipping, and a soft sigh that sounded like a surrender. Every nerve ending in Clara's body was on high alert, screaming a silent chorus of she's here, she's here, she's here. Sleep was an impossibility. Her carefully constructed piece was not just broken, it had been annihilated, reduced to atoms. Lena didn't leave the next day. Or the day after. She moved into Clara's spare room in a haze of unspoken agreement, her belongings arriving in a few apologetic-looking cardboard boxes. The apartment, once Clara's solitary fortress, was now a shared space. The air was different. Thicker. It hummed with a low-grade current that set Clara's teeth on edge. Their nights fell into a new, dangerous rhythm. After dinner, they would migrate to the couch, a bottle of wine between them, and they would talk. But the conversations were different now. They were not about Mark or work or any of the mundane topics that had filled their friendship for years. They were about bigger things. Deeper things. What do you think real love is supposed to feel like? Lena asked one night, swirling the red wine in her glass and staring into it as if it held the answers. With Mark, it felt like a role I was playing. The supportive girlfriend. I said the right lines, I hit my marks, but I always felt like I was watching myself from somewhere else. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, Clara said, her voice softer than she intended. Her heart was doing that painful twisting thing again, a knife turning slowly. She was giving relationship advice to the woman she loved, a special kind of ironic hell. I think real love is supposed to feel quiet. Not like a performance. Like, coming home, the words were out before she could stop them, a truth stolen from the deepest part of her. Lena looked up from her wine, her eyes locking onto Clara's. Coming home, she repeated, tasting the phrase. I like that. I don't think I've ever felt that. The physical space between them began to shrink, collapsing by imperceptible degrees. It started with a knee. Lena's knee pressing against Clara's as they sat on the sofa, a point of contact that lingered, warm and solid. Clara should have moved. She didn't. Then came the hugs. Their goodnight hugs at the end of the evening began to last a few seconds too long, a slow, reluctant peeling apart instead of a quick, friendly squeeze. Clara could feel the beat of Lena's heart against her own chest, a frantic, unsteady rhythm that matched hers. One evening, while they were cooking dinner together in the small kitchen, Clara had leaned over to grab the salt, and a strand of hair fell into her eyes. Before she could brush it away, Lena's fingers were there, ghosting against her temple, tucking the stray strand behind her ear. The touch was featherlight, almost accidental, but it sent a jolt of pure electricity straight through Clara's body. Her breath hitched. She looked up and found Lena already staring at her, her hand still hovering near Clara's face, her expression one of dawning surprise, as if her own hand had betrayed her. She pulled her hand back quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Sorry," she mumbled, turning back to the pasta sauce. But the space she had just touched on Clara's skin tingled, branded by the contact. A line had been crossed. They both knew it. The most damning moment came during a movie night a week later. They were watching some mindless romantic comedy, a genre Clara usually avoided like the plague. Halfway through, lulled by the wine and the dim light, Lena's hand, which had been resting on the cushion between them, moved. Her fingers brushed against Clara's, a hesitant exploration. Clara's entire world narrowed to that single point of contact. She didn't breathe. She didn't move. Slowly, tentatively, Lena's fingers interlaced with hers, her palm pressing against Clara's in a gesture of such simple, profound intimacy that it felt louder than a shout. They sat like that for the rest of the movie, hands clasped together, a silent, powerful current flowing between them. Neither of them acknowledged it. They didn't need to. It was a confession made without words. Clara started to notice other things too. Small, unguarded moments that spoke volumes. She'd catch Lena watching her from across the room with a new kind of softness in her gaze, an expression that was part curiosity and part something that looked terrifyingly like longing. Once, while Clara was passionately ranting about a book she'd just finished, she saw Lena's eyes drop, just for a second, to her lips. The glance was so quick it was almost imperceptible, but Clara saw it. She felt it like a physical touch. Her rant faltered, her words dying in her throat. The air between them crackled, thick with everything they weren't saying. This new reality was unsustainable. It was a beautiful, terrifying bubble, and Clara knew it was only a matter of time before it burst. The hope that she had worked so hard to kill was not only alive but thriving, growing wild and untamed in the fertile ground of Lena's new proximity. And it was going to destroy her. She had survived the quiet ache of unrequited love. She was not sure she could survive the devastation of reciprocated feelings that could never be acted upon, or worse, feelings that were just a mirage, a projection of Lena's post-breakup confusion. So she started to pull back. It was an act of self-preservation, a desperate retreat. She made excuses to be out of the apartment more. She'd take her laptop to a coffee shop to work, claiming the apartment was too distracting. She'd suddenly have plans with other friends, plans that conveniently kept her out until after Lena had gone to bed. She kept the conversations light, superficial, erecting her walls again, this time not out of apathy, but out of sheer, unadulterated terror. The shift was immediate and palpable. The warm, humming atmosphere in the apartment cooled, replaced by a strained, questioning silence. The easy intimacy they had built vanished, leaving a void that felt vast and cold. Lena's smiles became smaller, her eyes clouded with a confusion that pricked at Clara's conscience. But the fear was stronger than the guilt. Fear of hoping. Fear of being wrong. Fear of shattering both of their lives. She lasted 4 days. On the 5th evening, Lena cornered her. Clara had just walked in, laden with groceries, her armor of avoidance firmly in place. Lena was standing in the middle of the kitchen, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of hurt and determination. There was no escape. "You've been avoiding me," Lena said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the air, sharp and clear. The sound of a final straw breaking. Clara fumbled with the grocery bags, setting them on the counter with more force than necessary. "I haven't," she lied, her voice sounding weak even to her own ears. "I've just been busy. Work is crazy." "No," Lena said, taking a step closer. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The intensity in her gaze was enough to pin Clara to the spot. "Don't lie to me, Clara. Not you. Something changed. It was something. And now you're gone. You're here, but you're a million miles away. Talk to me, her voice cracked on the last two words, a fissure of vulnerability appearing in her resolve. What's wrong? What aren't you telling me? The direct question landed like a stone in the pit of Clara's stomach. This was it. The point of no return. She could lie again, double down on the excuses, and maybe Lena would let it go. But it would be a lie that severed something vital between them forever. Or she could tell the truth, a truth that could detonate everything she held dear. Her friendship with Lena. Her own fragile, patched-together heart. She opened her mouth to deflect, to offer another platitude, but the look on Lena's face stopped her. It was a look of such raw, open-hearted pleading. She deserved more than a lie. Before Clara could formulate any kind of response, Lena's expression shifted, softening with a sudden, terrifying realization. Is it me?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Her eyes searched Clara's face, wide with a potent combination of fear and dawning hope. "Did I do something? When I held your hand?" Clara's silence was its own answer. Lena took another slow step forward, closing the distance between them until they were only a breath apart. She smelled of vanilla and something uniquely her, a scent that was home and danger all at once. Because Lena continued, her voice barely audible, shaking with the weight of her own confession, if I'm being honest. "I haven't been able to think about anything else." Clara's world narrowed to the space of that single breath between their bodies. I think something's changing," Lena whispered, her gaze flicking down to Clara's lips and then back up, a silent question in her eyes. "For me. I keep thinking about things I shouldn't be thinking about. Or maybe things I should have been thinking about all along." She swallowed hard, her own fear warring with a new, fierce bravery. "I've been thinking about you, Clara. A lot. And I've been thinking about kissing you." The words, spoken so softly, landed with the force of a detonation. They shattered the last of Clara's defenses, the last of her resolve. The air crackled, charged and volatile, thick with the impossible possibility that Lena had just laid at her feet. For a moment, Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was stare into the endless brown of Lena's eyes and see her own terrified hope reflected there. A single, hot tear escaped her control, tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. "Don't," Clara whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. It was the only word she could manage, a desperate plea for mercy. "Don't say that, Lena. Please don't say that unless you mean it." Lena's expression softened, the confusion melting away into a look of profound, heart-stopping certainty. "I mean it," she breathed, her own eyes shimmering. And with that, the dam inside Clara that had held back 2 years, 4 months, and now 12 days of unbearable love finally, completely, broke. The truth came rushing out, a torrent of pain and longing she was powerless to stop. "Because I have been in love with you for every single one of those days," Clara confessed, the words tasting of salt and relief. "And I just finally convinced myself I was over it. I finally found a way to breathe without you, and then you walked back in, and you asked to sleep in my bed, and now you're saying this, and I can't." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands, unable to bear the naked vulnerability of Lena's gaze. A beat of stunned silence followed. It was the longest second of Clara's life. Then, she felt gentle hands on her wrists, pulling her own hands away from her face. Lena was there, her expression one of utter devastation and wonder. 2 years. Lena whispered, the words full of awe and regret. Her thumb stroked the backs of Clara's hands, a soothing, grounding touch. "Oh, Clara. Oh my God. I'm so sorry." Her face crumpled for a second, a wave of guilt passing over her. Then it cleared, replaced by that same fierce certainty. "And I'm so not sorry. Because I think I'm just finally catching up." Lena let go of one of Clara's hands, her own hand rising slowly, hesitantly, to cup Clara's cheek. The touch was reverent. Her thumb stroked the damp skin just below Clara's eye, wiping away the evidence of her tears. The heat from Lena's palm was a brand, a promise. The world tilted and then settled, locking into a new, correct alignment. Everything that had been confusing and painful suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. "Can I?" Lena asked, her voice a fragile, hopeful whisper. It wasn't just a question about a kiss. It was a question about everything. About changing the entire foundation of their world. Clara couldn't find the words to answer. She could only nod, a small, jerky movement that conveyed all of her fear and all of her wanting. And then Lena leaned in. The first brush of their lips was impossibly soft. It was tentative, a question seeking an answer. It tasted of salt and wine and the silent, breathless shock of arrival. It was just a press of mouths, nothing more, but it sent a shockwave through Clara's entire system, lighting up every nerve ending that had lain dormant for so long. Then, Clara's hand came up, her fingers tangling in the soft hair at the nape of Lena's neck, and she tilted her head, deepening the kiss. It was no longer a question. It was a declaration. It was 2 years of silence and longing pouring out, a desperate, hungry claiming. Lena made a soft sound in the back of her throat, a sigh of surrender, and her other hand came up to mirror the first, cradling Clara's face as if she were something precious and breakable. The kiss changed, becoming more certain, more urgent. It was the relief of a truth finally spoken, the desperate joy of a hope that had been starved and was now being fed. It was gentle and it was ravenous, slow and frantic all at once. It was every late-night conversation, every lingering touch, every stolen glance culminating in this one, perfect, world-altering moment. When they finally pulled apart, it was only for air. They rested their foreheads together, breathing heavily, sharing the same space, the same breath. Clara kept her eyes closed, trying to memorize the feeling, the soft pressure of Lena's forehead against hers, the warmth of Lena's hands on her face, the thundering beat of her own heart finally in sync with another's. "Oh," Lena breathed out, the word a puff of warm air against Clara's lips. "Wow." She trailed off, searching for the right words. "That felt like coming home." Clara opened her eyes. Lena's were already open, inches away, dark and deep and filled with a wonder that mirrored her own. She had used Clara's own words, and in doing so, had validated a feeling Clara had thought she was destined to carry alone forever. A new feeling, sharp and cold, pierced through the warm haze of the kiss. Fear. Not of the kiss itself, but of everything that came after. The reality of it. The complexity. "I'm terrified," Clara admitted, her voice muffled as she leaned forward, pressing her face into the curve of Lena's neck. She inhaled the scent of her skin, grounding herself in the reality of the moment. She felt Lena's arms wrap around her, holding her tight, a circle of warmth and safety. "Me too," Lena murmured into her hair. Completely and utterly terrified, she paused, and her arms tightened almost imperceptibly. But not of this, she pulled back just enough to look Clara in the eyes, her expression achingly earnest. "I'm terrified that I almost missed it. That I almost went my whole life not knowing that love could feel like this." They stood there for a long time, just holding each other in the middle of the kitchen, the groceries forgotten on the counter. The world outside the circle of their arms ceased to exist. Later, they talked. They sat on the couch, hands still entwined, their knees touching, and they started to piece together the past from the perspective of their new present. Lena confessed how every moment of dissatisfaction with Mark, every hollow feeling of being misunderstood, was subconsciously underscored by a quiet comparison. "I was always measuring him against you," she said, her gaze fixed on their joined hands. "The way you listen, really listen. The way you can say more with one look than he could in an entire conversation. The way I feel, safe with you. I always just called it friendship. Best friendship. I told myself it was different. But it wasn't. I was just too blind, too conditioned to see what was right there in front of me the whole time. He never stood a chance, and that wasn't fair to him. I was looking for home in all the wrong houses." The confession was a balm on the raw, tender parts of Clara's heart. It didn't erase the pain of the last 2 years, but it reframed it, gave it a context that wasn't just about her own lonely suffering. "So, what do we do now?" Clara asked, the question hanging in the air, heavy with implication. It was one thing to fall into a kiss. It was another to build a life from its aftermath. Lena squeezed her hand, a firm, reassuring pressure. She turned to face her fully, her expression clear and resolute. "We take it one day at a time," she said, her voice steady. "And we don't hide anymore. Not from this. Not from each other." "Okay. Okay," Clara agreed, a real smile, wide and unburdened, finally reaching her eyes. 3 weeks later, morning light streamed into the kitchen, painting stripes across the wooden floor. The air smelled of fresh coffee and a new, easy piece. Mark's last few belongings had been collected the week prior, an exchange that was polite, distant, and blessedly free of drama. The spare room was no longer Lena's, it was just the spare room again. Lena now belonged in Clara's room. In her bed. In her life. Clara came up behind her as she stood by the coffee maker, humming a tuneless, happy song. She wrapped her arms around Lena's waist, resting her chin on her shoulder, falling into the natural, beautiful rhythm they had discovered together. It was a rhythm of quiet mornings, shared glances over dinner, and the simple, profound comfort of falling asleep in the arms of the person who knew you best. Lena turned in Clara's embrace, a soft smile on her lips as she handed her a warm mug. Her eyes were bright, clear of the confusion that had clouded them for so long. "You know," Lena said softly, her free hand coming up to trace the line of Clara's jaw with a familiar, loving touch. "For my whole life, I thought love was supposed to be this loud, dramatic thing. A performance, full of grand gestures and noisy declarations." She leaned in, her voice dropping to an intimate murmur. "But this quiet thing we have? This just being together? It's the loudest, most real thing I have ever felt." Clara's heart felt so full it might burst. She leaned in, capturing Lena's lips in a kiss that was gentle and sure, a kiss that tasted of coffee and contentment and the promise of 1,000 more mornings just like this one. "Then we're both exactly where we need to be," Clara whispered against her mouth. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the warmth of the sun and the woman she loved, Clara understood. The greatest loves weren't always the ones you chased after. Sometimes, they were the ones that had been sitting right next to you all along, just waiting, patiently, to finally be seen.